The cashier's hand closed around my wrist with a firmness that startled me. I had just placed a modest vanilla cake on the conveyor belt, a treat I had saved for all week when Mr. Sated Asazived Allen, a gray-haired man in his mid-60s, leaned closer. His voice, rough and urgent, cut through the hum of the grocery store. "Your son is being drained by that family. They're living large on his back." For a moment, I thought I had misheard. But his eyes sharp, almost trembling with conviction, left no room for doubt. My hand froze over the few bills I had counted 3 times before leaving home. The cake cost $45, nearly half my weekly grocery budget. I had justified it as a small offering for my son Daniel and his wife, Clara, a gesture to keep family peace. Now those words echoed in my ears like a siren. I tried to laugh it off, to brush away the warning as nonsense from a tired cashier. But my body betrayed me. My knees weakened. My breath turned shallow. "Excuse me?" I whispered, though my throat was tight. Mr. Allen only shook his head, scanning the cake, his eyes flicking toward my credit card that had just been declined. He spoke barely above a whisper. "They come here often. Designer bags, imported wine, premium cuts of meat. All cash. Meanwhile, your son works himself to the bone." He released my wrist as if nothing had happened, handed me the receipt, and moved to the next customer. But my world was no longer steady. I walked out the side exit, the cake box trembling in my hands. Outside, the autumn air was brisk, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and car exhaust. My heart pounded so loudly I thought passers-by could hear it. Was it true, or had I just been fed a cruel rumor? Daniel was waiting in the car, humming to the radio, oblivious. I couldn't bear to face him yet. Instead, I veered toward the dumpsters at the far end of the parking lot. The stench was sour, but from there I could see the store's main entrance without being seen myself. I pressed the cake against my chest as if it could steady my racing thoughts. Minutes crawled by. Mr. Allen's words replayed in my head, each repetition burrowing deeper. Living large on his back. Then it happened. A man in his 60s sharp suit jacket, shiny leather shoes, walked out carrying glossy black shopping bags emblazoned with a gold logo. Even from a distance, I recognized him. Victor Hayes, Clara's father. Those weren't grocery bags filled with bread and milk. They were from the upscale market I had only dared to peek into once, where a single wedge of cheese could equal my entire week's food budget. My throat tightened. Victor moved with the confidence of someone used to privilege. He approached a gleaming SUV parked just yards from my hiding spot. The vehicle was spotless, the tires new, the metallic paint shimmering in the afternoon sunday. Not the rusty sedan Clara always described when she called Daniel in tears, begging for a little help with Dad's medical bills. Victor popped the trunk, carefully laying the bags inside as though they held treasure. Then he pulled out his phone and laughed a deep, carefree laugh I hadn't heard in years. A man crushed by financial hardship doesn't laugh like that. I remembered Clara's late-night calls. "We can't cover the rent this month, Daniel. Dad's prescriptions cost hundreds we don't have." My son, with his kind heart, always found a way. Sometimes he wired them $1,000 in one night, money he earned from endless overtime shifts. Other times, he quietly postponed his own bills, just to spare Clara embarrassment. And me? I had dipped into my small retirement savings more than once. A temporary loan, Clara had called it. One time it was $500, another time nearly $1,000 money I had saved for dental work I kept postponing. Now, watching Victor toss shopping bags into an SUV worth more than my entire apartment, my stomach turned. I should have marched back to Daniel, told him everything, and demanded that he open his eyes. But a mother knows the fragile balance of trust. If I accused Clara's family without proof, Daniel would defend her, and I could lose him. So I stayed hidden, clutching the cake, my fingers trembling. 2 elderly women pushed their carts past me, chatting loudly. "Did you see Clara's dress at the mall yesterday? Must have cost $200 at least," one said. The other replied, "And the French beauty shop my granddaughter works there. Clara's a regular. Cash, every time." Their laughter stung more than the cold wind. Was everyone seeing the truth except my son and me? Victor closed the trunk and scanned the lot, his eyes sweeping dangerously close to my hiding place. I shrank back, my pulse thundering. For a moment, I feared he'd seen me. Then he turned, waved at a neighbor, and handed the man a wad of bills, casual, generous, thoughtless. The SUV's engine purred to life, smooth and expensive. As he drove away, I felt my last defenses crumble. Mr. Allen's whisper had been no rumor. This was a scheme, and my son was the target. I stayed crouched behind the reeking dumpster long after Victor's SUV disappeared. The cake box felt heavier in my arms, as if it carried not frosting and sponge but the weight of betrayal itself. My breath turned into small, frantic bursts. What had I just witnessed? Was it an illusion born from suspicion, or had I truly seen the mask slip from Clara's family? I tried to reason with myself. Maybe Victor had borrowed the car. Maybe the bags belonged to someone else. Maybe. Each excuse I whispered felt thinner than tissue paper. The truth was harder to swallow. The cashier's warning aligned perfectly with what my own eyes had confirmed. I thought of Daniel, sitting in the car only a few rows away. He would be drumming his fingers on the steering wheel, humming like he always did when he waited. My son, 42 years old, is working 12-hour shifts as an engineer, sacrificing weekends for overtime, all to make sure Clara's family is comfortable. Comfortable. The word struck me like a blow. How comfortable were they really? Comfortable enough to drink imported wine while Daniel paid their unpaid rent. Comfortable enough to drive a gleaming SUV while I counted coins for medication. A memory surfaced with cruel clarity. Last winter, when Clara had called Daniel sobbing, saying her father needed urgent medication not covered by insurance. Daniel had hung up, his face pale, then quietly told me he would handle it. The next morning, I found an ATM slip on the kitchen counter, $1,000 withdrawn in cash. I had scolded him gently, told him he needed to save for his own future, but he only smiled that weary smile of his. "They're family now, Mom," he'd said. What kind of man would I be if I didn't help? Back then, I had believed his generosity was noble. Now, replaying those words under the shadow of the dumpster, they cut me open. I shifted on my feet, trying to steady my mind. Was I overreacting? Could Victor still be an honest man simply enjoying a rare luxury? Yet even as I asked the question, my gut screamed the answer. The puzzle pieces I had ignored for months were aligning into a chilling picture. Clara's immaculate wardrobe was always explained away as second-hand steals. The fancy meals she bragged about on social media were supposedly friends' treat. The brand-new curtains in their home were credited to a discount warehouse. Each story at the time had seemed harmless. Now they stacked up like bricks in a wall of deception. I remembered, too, my own sacrifices. Skipping a dental appointment because I had sent Clara $500 for her father's emergency. Postponing my medication refill because Daniel needed extra cash to cover their overdue utilities. I had told myself it was temporary, that good deeds would circle back someday. But sitting there in the cold, I realized those sacrifices had not been for family survival, they had been fuel for someone else's indulgence. The voices of the two women in the parking lot still rang in my ears. She spends as if money were raining from the sky. If neighbors had noticed Clara's extravagance, then surely Daniel had too, or had love blinded him so thoroughly that he simply couldn't see. I clenched the cake tighter. A ridiculous thought crossed my mind, smashing it against the pavement, letting the frosting splatter like the lies smeared across our lives. But I couldn't. That cake represented my hope of holding us together, a bandage on a wound that was already festering. My phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "Mom, everything okay? You're taking a while." I typed back quickly. "Long line. Be right there." My thumb hovered over the send button. The lie stung. But how could I explain the truth when I didn't yet understand its full scope? I slipped the phone back into my purse and took a shaky breath. I needed to be sure. Rumors, whispers, even suspicious sightings, they weren't enough. If I confronted Daniel now, I risked losing him. He loved Clara fiercely, almost defensively. If I accused her family without undeniable proof, he might choose her side and shut me out forever. I couldn't lose my son. That night, alone in my apartment, I replayed the afternoon like a movie on repeat. Mr. Allen's grip, Victor's SUV, the neighbor women's chatter. Each detail etched itself deeper into my mind. Sleep wouldn't come. Instead, I sat in my recliner with the cake untouched on the counter, whispering promises to myself. I'll watch. I'll wait. I'll gather proof. The idea terrified me. At 70 years old, I was no detective. My bones ached when I stood too long, and my pension barely covered my bills. But I had one weapon Clara's family underestimated: a mother's resolve. Because if this was true, if they were draining Daniel of tens of thousands while laughing behind our backs, then I would expose them. Even if it meant sacrificing the fragile peace I had tried to maintain for years. I pulled a notepad from the drawer and began to jot down dates, amounts, and memories. The $500 for rent. The $1,000 for medication. The countless little transfers Daniel had made without hesitation. As the list grew, so did my fury. By the time the clock struck midnight, I had a decision. I would no longer accept stories at face value. I would gather evidence so solid that not even Daniel's love for Clara could deny it. I closed the notepad with trembling hands. A storm was brewing in my heart, stronger than fear, stronger even than grief. Because this wasn't just about money. It was about saving my son before he lost everything. The next morning, I woke before dawn, my mind restless from fragments of half-sleep. The notepad I had filled the night before still sat on the coffee table, its pages scrawled with dates, amounts, and excuses I had once accepted. The numbers looked ugly in the gray light. Each dollar represented a sacrifice, a little piece of Daniel's future slipping away. I fixed myself a cup of instant coffee, though it tasted bittier than usual. My thoughts kept circling the same truth. I could no longer ignore the signs. But how does a 70-year-old woman fight a web of lies spun so tightly around her son? By the time Daniel arrived to pick me up for lunch at Clara's parents' house, I had made up my mind. I would watch more closely. I would stay silent for now, but I would not let a single detail escape me. As we drove, Daniel hummed softly to the radio, the same habit that had calmed him as a boy. His face looked tired, with faint shadows under his eyes betraying weeks of overtime. Yet when he spoke about Clara, his voice carried warmth. He believed in her, believed in all of them. And that, more than anything, terrified me. "Mom, you'll like the meal today," he said, smiling briefly at me. "Clara said they've been saving to make something special." Saving, I echoed under my breath, the word sour on my tongue. We stopped at the same grocery store as yesterday. I insisted on going inside alone, pretending I wanted to pick up a small card to go with the cake. Daniel stayed in the car. My heart hammered as I stepped through the automatic doors, eyes scanning for Mr. Allen, but his register was closed, and disappointment stung me. I bought the card quickly and stepped outside, but instead of walking straight back, I veered again toward the dumpsters. The smell of rotting produce stung my nose, but I crouched low, positioning myself where I could see the parking lot clearly. Minutes later, my patience was rewarded. There he was again, Victor. Same polished shoes, same effortless confidence. Only this time, he wasn't alone. A delivery truck had pulled up, its side marked with the logo of a luxury catering service I recognized from advertisements. Two men in uniforms carried crates to the back of Victor's SUV boxes labeled imported seafood, French cheeses, premium wines. My throat tightened. I knew those brands. I had once walked past them in the store and shaken my head at the prices. A single lobster tail costs what I spent on groceries for a week. And here they were, loaded casually into Victor's car as if they were everyday staples. I scribbled notes on the back of my receipt: seafood, cheese, wines, Suv, morning delivery. My handwriting trembled, but the words felt like weapons I was stockpiling for the battle ahead. Victor signed a paper, slipped a tip into one man's hand, at least 2 20s, maybe more, and then glanced around the lot. His eyes swept dangerously close to where I hid. I pressed myself against the metal dumpster, holding my breath. For a terrifying second, I thought he had seen me, but he only adjusted his sunglasses, smirked, and climbed into the driver's seat. The SUV purred away, leaving only the smell of exhaust and my pounding heart behind. I exhaled shakily. Every instinct told me I was on the edge of something much darker than I had imagined. This wasn't a struggling family scraping by. This was a family thriving on deception, financed by my son's sweat and my savings. When I finally returned to Daniel's car, he looked at me with concern. "Mom, you okay? You look pale." "Just a long line." I lied again, forcing a smile. "You know how weekends are." He nodded, accepting it without question. and started the engine. My lie sat heavy on my tongue. But what else could I do? The truth would have shattered him, and I still needed more proof, undeniable proof. As we approached Clara's neighborhood, my stomach knotted tighter. The houses stood neat and freshly painted, lawns trimmed to perfection. These weren't the homes of families drowning in debt. When we pulled into the Hayes' driveway, I spotted something new. A rented party tent stacked neatly at the side of the house, as if waiting to be assembled. My pulse quickened. Why would a family who supposedly couldn't pay for medicine be planning a catered event? The front door opened before we knocked. Clara stood there, radiant in a dress that shimmered like silk. Her smile was wide, her perfume strong. "Margaret, what a joy to see you," she exclaimed, pulling me into a hug. As she pressed her cheek against mine, I caught sight of her earrings' delicate diamonds that sparkled in the sunlight. Diamonds. I knew enough to guess their worth was well over $1,000. My stomach lurched. "Oh, these old things?" Clara said with a laugh when she noticed my eyes linger. "Clearance sale last season. Another miracle deal. Another too perfect excuse." Inside, the house smelled of roasted meats and fresh herbs. My gaze darted around. New curtains, a leather sofa, a flat-screen television so large it dominated the wall. Every corner whispered luxury. Yet Daniel walked in smiling, blind to the evidence. I forced myself to sit, to smile, to let Clara chatter about recipes and decorations. But my mind screamed. I couldn't confront them yet, not here, not without undeniable evidence. As lunch began, Clara's father appeared in the doorway, apron tied neatly over his shirt. For a moment, our eyes locked. His smile was polite, but something flickered there, a recognition, maybe even suspicion. Had he seen me behind the dumpster? The thought chilled me. I looked away quickly, gripping my fork tighter than necessary. My notes burned in my pocket, silent proof of what I had seen. I told myself again, be patient, watch, collect everything. Then, when the time comes, Daniel won't be able to deny it. But deep down, a darker fear coiled. What if by the time I revealed the truth, it was already too late? That night, long after Daniel had dropped me home, I sat in my armchair with the cake untouched on the counter. My apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the creak of old pipes. But inside my mind, voices shouted, Mr. Allen's warning, Victor's SUV, Clara's glittering earrings. I closed my eyes, and the memories returned sharp, unforgiving. There was the winter Daniel came over with his coat damp from the snow. He looked exhausted, his cheeks hollow. Clara's dad had another setback, he'd said, trying to sound calm. They're short on rent again. I'll cover it, but it might mean working weekends. I had nodded, pretending to approve, while secretly my heart ached. I knew what working weekends meant. No time to rest, no chance to breathe. Yet Daniel believed it was his duty. He had inherited his father's work ethic and my soft heart. A dangerous combination. Another memory surfaced me at the bank, withdrawing 9 crisp $100 bills from the envelope I had labeled Emergency Dental. Clara had called that morning, her voice broken with sobs. Margaret, please, Dad's medication is more than we can handle. If we don't buy it today, he could get worse. I hadn't hesitated. I handed the bills to Daniel, telling him it was just a loan. But in truth, I never expected to see that money again. And there was the afternoon I sat at my kitchen table, carefully cutting coupons from the Sunday paper, while Clara posted photos of her brunch on social media: mimosas, eggs, Benedict, the kind of meal that cost more than my groceries for the week. How had I not seen it? How had I convinced myself that their luxuries were accidents, coincidences, clearance deals? Because love makes fools of us all. I opened my notepad again, writing down each sacrifice I could remember. $500 for rent, $900 for medicine. $1,000 had been wired for utilities. Little by little, the numbers stacked higher. By the time I added it all, the sum was staggering. Tens of thousands of dollars bled away drop by drop. My chest tightened. It wasn't just about the money, it was about dignity. I had worked for decades as a nurse, standing on aching feet, saving every penny for a modest retirement. Daniel had pushed himself beyond exhaustion to provide for his future family. And all of it had been siphoned away by people who smiled at us across a dinner table. I pressed a hand to my eyes, fighting back tears. But grief gave way to something stronger: fury. This had to stop. I needed more than suspicions and memories. I needed proof that Daniel could not ignore. Proof that would rip the blindfold from his eyes. I looked around my small apartment. The faded curtains, the secondhand furniture, the chipped dishes. Everything about my life spoke of sacrifice. Yet the Hyaces lived in abundance, their lies polished and rehearsed. Not anymore, I whispered into the quiet. Not one more dollar. I knew I couldn't do it alone, but perhaps I didn't have to. Mr. Allen had already risked speaking up. Maybe he had more information. Maybe the neighbors had stories. I would gather it all, piece by piece, until the truth was undeniable. And here's where I want to pause for a moment, because I know many of you watching have lived through something similar. Maybe it wasn't a son or a daughter-in-law, but a friend, a sibling, even a neighbor who took advantage of your kindness. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been in a situation where your generosity was abused? What did you do about it? Your stories matter, not just to me, but to everyone reading them. They remind us that we're not alone in these struggles. And if you want to hear how Margaret's journey unfolds, how far a mother will go to protect her only son, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Every chapter brings new twists, and you won't want to miss what comes next. Back in my chair, I clutched the notepad to my chest like a shield. My plan was clear: watch, listen, collect. I would be patient, even if it meant playing the role of the quiet, naive mother a little longer. Because the truth was out there, and I was ready to hunt it down. Still, a cold thought gnawed at me as I prepared for bed. If Victor had seen me in the parking lot that morning, if he had sensed my suspicion, then the game had already begun, and I wasn't sure who held the advantage. The Hayes house looked different the following weekend. As Daniel parked in the driveway, I noticed the tent I had seen earlier was now fully assembled in the backyard. White fabric gleamed in the sunlight, trimmed with golden ribbons that fluttered in the breeze. Through the open sides, I glimpsed rows of tables draped in linen, crystal glasses catching the light like jewels. Daniel beamed. Clara said they're just doing something simple, family and a few friends. Simple. My son still couldn't see it. We walked inside, and I nearly stumbled. The living room had been transformed since my last visit. New artwork adorned the walls, abstract paintings in heavy frames. A chandelier glittered overhead, its prisms scattering light across the polished hardwood floor. The sofa, once a modest fabric set, had been replaced with buttery leather. A sleek flat-screen television hung above the fireplace, so large it dominated the room. Clara swept in, radiant in a deep emerald dress that shimmered as she moved. She kissed Daniel on the cheek, then turned to me with a smile as polished as her jewelry. "Margaret, I'm so glad you came. Today's going to be special." Her perfume, expensive, unmistakable, lingered in the air after she passed. I remembered seeing that bottle once behind a locked glass case in a department store. The price tag had made me wince. $200. In the kitchen, I caught sight of counters crowded with platters: roasted lamb, trays of shrimp, bowls of exotic fruit, and bottles of wine whose labels I recognized from advertisements boasting award-winning imports. Each detail stabbed deeper. These weren't the makings of a family scraping to survive. As guests began to arrive, laughter filled the house. Well-dressed couples streamed in, handing Clara bottles of champagne and carefully wrapped gifts. Victor held court in the living room, shaking hands, slapping shoulders, pouring wine as though he were a king entertaining his court. I sat quietly in a corner, notebook hidden in my purse, eyes scanning everything. Daniel mingled easily, proud to see his wife and in-laws managing so well. He didn't notice that the caterers wore black uniforms embroidered with a high-end logo, or that the string quartet in the corner tuned instruments worth thousands. I did, and each note carved another wound. A woman near me whispered, "This is stunning. Victor really outdid himself this year." "Yes," another replied, her voice low but admiring. "I heard the catering alone cost over $5,000. $5,000. My stomach churned. That was nearly half of Daniel's yearly student loan payments, the very loans he'd been struggling to finish while wiring money to this house. I wanted to shout, to grab Daniel by the shoulders and point to the overflowing tables, the polished silverware, the casually expensive laughter ringing through the hall, but my son's face glowed with pride. He believed this was family unity, that his sacrifices had built something worthwhile. I couldn't shatter him yet, not without evidence he couldn't ignore. When dinner began, Clara rose to give a toast. Her voice was warm, her smile perfect. "We've been through so much hardship this past year," she said, eyes glistening as if on cue. "But thanks to the love of family and the blessings we've received, we're stronger than ever." The room applauded. Daniel's eyes shone with emotion. My hands trembled under the table. Hardship? Blessings? The hypocrisy nearly choked me. The courses arrived one after another. Lobster tails bathed in butter, lamb seasoned with herbs I couldn't pronounce, cakes layered with imported chocolate. I forced bites past my lips, though every swallow tasted of betrayal. Halfway through, Clara leaned toward Daniel, lowering her voice just enough for me to hear. "Darling, we may need to ask you for a little help again next week. Dad's hours at work were cut again." My fork froze midair. Daniel squeezed her hand without hesitation. "Of course, anything you need." My vision blurred with fury. I wanted to slam my glass down, to expose the lie in front of every guest. But I stayed silent, gripping my napkin so tightly it nearly tore. Because the game wasn't over. Not yet. When dessert was served, Victor strolled over to me, his smile smooth as polished stone. "Margaret, are you enjoying yourself?" I forced my lips to curve. "It's impressive." He leaned closer, his voice low. "It takes effort to maintain appearances, doesn't it?" His eyes glittered, daring me to challenge him. I stared back, my pulse pounding. Did he know I had been watching him? Did he suspect I was gathering proof? Before I could answer, Clara called him away to greet another guest, but his words lingered in my ears like a threat. As the night wound down, Daniel hugged me warmly. "See, Mom? They're doing their best. We just need to support them a little longer." I smiled weakly, my heart breaking. He was blind, and I couldn't open his eyes without a weapon stronger than love. That night, back in my apartment, I wrote furiously in my notebook, "Caterers, string quartet, $5,000 catering estimate, Clara's toast about hardship, Victor's warning words." The list grew longer, the evidence sharper. But I knew one thing for certain. If Victor already suspected my doubts, then every step forward would be dangerous. And the next move I made could either save my son or cost him forever. The party had ended hours ago, but my mind still buzzed with the clinking of crystal glasses and Clara's too-perfect smile. I couldn't sleep. The next morning, I decided to walk in their neighborhood before heading home, partly to clear my head, to see what more I might discover. The street was quiet, lined with neat lawns and trimmed hedges, the kind of place that costs money just to maintain its polish. I slowed my steps near the Hayes house, pretending to admire the flowers. That's when I heard them, two women pushing strollers, chatting as they passed. "Did you see Clara at the mall yesterday?" one asked, her voice sharp with curiosity. "That dress must have been at least $300. I saw the same one in Nordstrom." Her companion laughed softly. "That's nothing. My niece works at the French cosmetics store. Clara's in there every week, paying cash, perfumes, skincare, you name it. And yet they tell everyone they're struggling? Please." I froze, my pulse quickening. The women had no idea I was listening. I heard from Mark at the bank. The first woman continued in a hushed tone. "Victor deposits thousands every month. Doesn't sound like a man on reduced hours to me." "Exactly," the other replied. "And then those parties they throw? Last month they had caterers, a DJ, and even ice sculptures. Who does that if they can't pay rent?" They laughed again, pushing their strollers farther down the block, their voices fading. I stood rooted to the spot, my hands trembling. Gossip, yes, but gossip that lined up perfectly with what I had seen myself. Clara's wardrobe, Victor's SUV, the tent and caterers. Now I had the words of neighbors echoing my suspicions. I pulled out my notepad, scribbling furiously. Neighbors confirm, Clara shops luxury. Victor deposits thousands, parties with ice sculptures. Each detail was another nail in the coffin of their carefully crafted story. Yet part of me recoiled. I was no busybody. I had always prided myself on minding my own business. But this wasn't idle curiosity. This was about my son's life being drained away, dollar by dollar, lie by lie. As I turned back toward the house, Another memory surfaced: Clara's late-night call months earlier. She had been sobbing, saying Victor needed a specialist. "Please, Margaret, if we can't pay, he could lose his treatment." I'd rushed to the bank the next morning, withdrawing $700 from my emergency fund. That money had been meant for new tires on my aging car. I had handed it over gladly, picturing Victor in a hospital gown, tubes and monitors surrounding him. But now, I pictured him lifting champagne flutes under a glittering chandelier while my tires wore thin. The thought made my blood boil. I forced myself to keep walking, to calm my breathing. My plan hadn't changed: collect undeniable proof. And the neighbor's words, as validating as they were, still weren't enough. I needed something Daniel couldn't brush aside as rumors. As I reached the corner, a man washing his car gave me a polite nod. I recognized him from the party, the one Victor had tipped so casually in the driveway. His car gleamed, suds dripping onto the pavement. "Lovely evening yesterday," he said with a smile. "Yes," I replied carefully. "Quite. Extravagant." "How?" He chuckled. "Victor doesn't do anything halfway, that's for sure. I've seen the catering trucks here more than once. He's got expensive taste, but he pays well." My throat tightened. Pays well. Not scrapes by, not does his best. Pays well. I nodded politely, heart racing, and moved on before my anger slipped through my carefully controlled expression. By the time I returned to Daniel's car, my notebook was heavier than ever, though it was only paper and ink. I could barely look at my son when he smiled and asked, "Ready, Mom?" I wanted to scream, "Ready? Ready for what? Ready to watch your savings vanish while your wife parades around in silk? Ready to let Victor toast guests with $5,000 wine while you cancel your dentist appointment?" But I only smiled faintly and slid into the seat. On the drive home, Daniel hummed, as he always did. But this time the sound didn't comfort me. It broke me. Because I realized the same hum that once soothed me as a child was now a soundtrack to his own blindness. That night, alone again in my small apartment, I reviewed my notes. Gossip, observations, inconsistencies, they all pointed in one direction. But my son's loyalty was a fortress. He would need something undeniable. As if in answer to my silent plea, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number lit the screen. I hesitated, then opened it. It was a photo. A grocery receipt totaling $1,247. Imported seafood, aged cheeses, specialty wines, and desserts flown in from Europe. And at the bottom, the name on the card, Victor Hayes. Beneath it, a short message. "Mrs. Cole, I thought you should see this. Alan." My breath caught. My hands trembled. This was it, the proof I had prayed for. But as I stared at the receipt glowing on my phone, another thought crept in, dark and heavy. If Victor ever found out Alan was helping me, would he stop at intimidation? Or worse? The stakes had just risen. The receipt glowed on my phone screen, its numbers cutting sharper than any knife. $1,247. Seafood, cheeses, wines, imported desserts. I whispered the total out loud, as if hearing it would make it less surreal. But no matter how many times I read it, the truth stared back. Victor's signature at the bottom confirmed what my gut already knew. Their hardship was a carefully rehearsed illusion. I set the phone down, pressing both hands to my face. For months, maybe years, Daniel had been draining himself for a family who thought nothing of spending in one day what I spent in a month. My apartment felt smaller that night, the walls closing in. I tried to focus on the little things, the hum of the fridge, the creak of the radiator, the steady tick of my clock. But even those familiar sounds were drowned out by the roar of my anger. I picked up my notepad again and copied the details from the photo. The 14th of April, $1,247, Victor Hayes. Grocery receipt, seafood, cheese, wine, and desserts. As my pen scraped the paper, I realized I was building more than a list. I was building a case, a file that would one day free my son from their grip. Still, fear pricked at me. If Victor suspected Alan had given me the receipt, what might he do? People like him didn't like their masks being threatened. The following morning, I decided to return to the store. My heart pounded as I walked to Mr. Allen's register. His lined face softened when he saw me. "You got my message?" he asked quietly, scanning a loaf of bread I had picked up only for appearance's sake. I nodded. "Yes, Thank you. But why help me? His eyes grew distant. Because I've seen this before. My own mother. She trusted the wrong people. By the time anyone told her the truth, she had nothing left. I won't stand by and watch it happen again. Emotions swelled in my chest. You don't know what this means to me. I know what it means to your son, he said firmly, and you're going to need more. I'll send what I can. I squeezed his hand before leaving, my eyes stinging. That evening, another message buzzed on my phone. Another receipt. This one, $989. 2 bottles of champagne, each priced over $100. Imported steaks, caviar. The date? The very same day, Clara had called Daniel, crying, begging for help with Dad's medical bills. I nearly dropped the phone. The audacity of it all made my skin crawl. For the next week, Alan sent 3 more receipts. One for $600, another for $1,050, and the last most damning over $1,500, including a floral arrangement so extravagant it looked like something out of a celebrity wedding. Each new photo was a hammer blow, smashing the fragile excuses Clara had offered. Clearance sales, generous friends, second-hand bargains, lies, all lies. I printed every receipt, sliding them into a folder. My hands shook as I flipped through the pages, the numbers stacking higher and higher, nearly $6,000 in luxury purchases in less than a month. And how much had Daniel sent them at the same time? At least $3,000, maybe more. The fury that filled me was no longer quiet. It burned hot and steady, demanding action. Yet I knew my son. If I stormed into his apartment waving receipts, he would retreat behind Clara's smile, defend her with the stubbornness of love. No, I needed the right moment. A moment when Daniel was too weary to hide behind denial. That moment came sooner than I expected. One night he came to my apartment after work. His shoulders slumped, his tie loosened. He dropped heavily into a chair, rubbing his temples. Long day? I asked softly. He sighed. Clara asked me to send another $2,000. Says her dad needs surgery. Insurance won't cover it. My hand gripped the edge of the table. Surgery? The word stung. After everything I'd seen, I couldn't bear another lie. I wanted to shout, "No, Daniel, they're lying. I have proof, look." Instead, I forced my voice steady. "That's a lot of money, son." "I know," he whispered. "But what choice do I have? He's family." The folder of receipts sat only a few feet away in my drawer, heavy with evidence. My pulse thundered. Should I pull it out now? Should I risk it? Daniel looked up, his eyes weary but resolute. "Mom, you always taught me to help those in need. I can't turn my back on them." My chest ached. He was quoting my own lessons back at me, lessons they had twisted to their advantage. I reached across the table, gripping his hand. "Daniel, sometimes the kindest thing you can do is stop letting people use you." He frowned, confusion flickering in his eyes. "What are you saying?" My heart pounded as I opened my mouth, but before the words could spill out, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Alan. I glanced at the screen and froze. This time it wasn't just a receipt. It was a photo of Victor himself, standing at the store counter, his hands stacked with bills, laughing as he signed. Proof not only of the spending, but of the man behind it. I swallowed hard, meeting my son's expectant eyes. The moment of truth was coming, and once I showed him, there would be no turning back. I slid the photo across the table, my hands trembling but steady enough to show determination. Daniel leaned forward, brow furrowing. His tired eyes scanned the glossy image glowing from my phone screen, Victor at the register, bills spilling from his wallet. A smile stretched wide across his face. Silence stretched between us, broken only by the tick of my wall clock. Finally, Daniel exhaled sharply. "Mom, this doesn't prove anything." My chest constricted. "Doesn't prove anything? Daniel, look at him. Look at the receipts. Lobster, champagne, wine that costs more than your week's groceries. How does a man begging for rent money afford this?" He rubbed his forehead, shaking his head. "Maybe he got a bonus. Maybe Clara covered it with her paycheck. You don't know the whole story." Ugh. I slammed my palm against the table, the sound echoing through the small apartment. "I know enough. I know you've been wiring thousands of dollars while they drink champagne and throw parties with string quartets. Daniel, they are lying to you." He flinched at the volume of my voice, His jaw tightened. "Mom, stop. Please. Clara is my wife. Her family is my family. They wouldn't— They already have." The words tore from me, raw and desperate. "Look at the dates on these receipts. Do you see this one?" I thrust a paper toward him, finger jabbing the line that read $989, 2 bottles of champagne, imported steaks, caviar. This was the same day Clara called you, crying about medical bills. The same day you pulled $2,000 from your savings account. His face paled, but his lips pressed into a stubborn line. It's a coincidence." "A coincidence?" My voice broke, both with fury and heartbreak. "Daniel, open your eyes. They've drained you, and when you're dry, they'll move on. Is that what you want? To work yourself into an early grave while Victor laughs behind your back?" He pushed back from the table, standing so quickly his chair scraped against the floor. "You don't understand, Mom. You've never really accepted Clara. You look for reasons to hate her family." The accusation pierced me. My voice softened, though my heart still thundered. "Daniel, do you truly believe I'd invent all this? Do you think I'd risk our relationship, risk losing you, just because I don't like your wife?" His chest heaved, his hands clenched. For a moment, I thought he might storm out, but instead he turned away, staring at the floor. I rose slowly, coming to stand beside him. I placed a hand on his arm, gentle but firm. "Son, listen to me. Trust is sacred, but blind trust can destroy you. These receipts, these photos, they aren't gossip. They're facts, and facts don't lie." He swallowed hard, his voice low. "And what if you're wrong? What if this tears apart my marriage for nothing?" Tears blurred my vision. "Then I'll bear the guilt. But if I'm right, and I know in my bones that I am, then every dollar you've given them, every hour of overtime you've worked, has been stolen under the mask of love." He didn't answer. He just stood there, shoulders sagging, as if the weight of both worlds, mine and Clara's, were pressing down at once. Finally, he whispered, I need time to think." I wanted to grab him, to shake him, to make him see, but I knew pushing harder would only drive him deeper into Clara's arms. So I stepped back, letting the silence speak. He moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. "Mom, please, don't tell anyone else about this. Not yet." His voice was pleading, uncertain, almost broken. I nodded slowly, though my resolve only grew stronger. "All right, but Daniel, time is running out. For you, for your future." He left without another word, the door clicking shut behind him. My apartment felt colder, emptier. I sank into my chair, clutching the folder of receipts. My body shook, not from weakness but from rage barely contained. For the first time, Daniel had seen cracks in the illusion. But Clara's grip was strong, and love can blind even the wisest heart. I stared at the folder, then at my phone. Alan's texts were still there, more evidence waiting, the neighbor's gossip, my own observations. I whispered to the empty room, "If Daniel won't see with his eyes, then I'll make him see with the truth." Because this wasn't just about money anymore. This was a battle for my son's soul. The silence after my confrontation with Daniel stretched for days. He didn't call, didn't visit, and when I tried reaching out, his replies were short, "Busy at work, Mom. We'll talk soon." I feared I had pushed him away, that Clara's grip had tightened. But in my heart, I sensed something else, doubt. Doubt is a seed. Once planted, it grows in the quiet. Late one evening, my phone rang. Daniel's voice was low, cautious. "Mom, I need to ask you something. Do you still have those receipts?" My pulse leapt. "Yes, everyone. Don't show them to anyone." "Not yet. I'll come by tomorrow." The next day, he arrived looking older than his years, his face lined with worry. He sat at my table, flipping through the folder, his hands trembling. He studied each line. Lobster, champagne, designer groceries. His lips moved silently as he matched the dates against his phone. "Clara called me that night," he whispered, pointing to one. "Said they couldn't pay the gas bill. I sent her $600. And here," he jabbed another receipt, eyes widening. "The same week she begged for money for her dad's medication, they spent $1,247 on wine and desserts." his face drained of color. I reached for his hand, but he pulled back, staring at the papers as if they might catch fire. "Mom, if this is true, if it's really true," his voice cracked, "then I've been a fool." "No," I said gently. "You've been a good man. They twisted that goodness against you." He buried his face in his hands. "I need to know for sure. I can't accuse Clara without proof she can't deny." The following week, Daniel began watching more closely. He told Clara he was working late, then drove past her parents' house instead. He saw catering trucks parked outside on a Tuesday afternoon. He noticed brand new patio furniture gleaming in their backyard, still wrapped in plastic. At home, he checked their bank account. Clara had always insisted on handling their finances, saying she was better with numbers. But when he finally logged in, his stomach dropped. Thousands withdrawn in cash, always around the same days her family claimed emergencies. Still, when he confronted Clara gently, she had an explanation ready. "Those were medical bills," she said, her tone indignant. "Do you think I'd lie to you about my father's health?" Daniel wanted to believe her, but the seed of doubt had already sprouted. One night, while Clara showered, Daniel's eyes fell on her handbag tossed carelessly on the bed. Guilt gnawed at him, but desperation pushed him forward. He opened it. Inside, nestled among makeup compacts and perfume bottles, was a small spiral notebook. Curiosity prickled his skin as he flipped it open. At first, the pages seemed like ordinary notes, grocery lists, reminders, but then his breath caught. Each page detailed money requests, dates, amounts, and reasons. The 12th of March, ask Daniel for $800, say rent is overdue. April Arba Esra, request, Steim, Apis, use surgery excuse. May 3, tell him utilities shut off, ask $650. Every lie, every fabricated crisis, was laid out in her neat handwriting. Daniel's stomach lurched. He turned another page and found notes written like a script. If he hesitates, cry. Mention how hard Dad has worked. Remind him he promised, in sickness and in health. His chest tightened, bile rising. This wasn't just casual dishonesty. It was a strategy, calculated manipulation. The sound of running water stopped. Clara's footsteps approached. Panic surged. He shoved the notebook back into her bag, heart pounding as she entered the bedroom, toweling her hair. "Everything okay?" she asked, smiling as if nothing were amiss. Daniel forced a nod, his throat too tight for words. That night, he barely slept, the words from the notebook burning in his mind. Ask Daniel. Cry if needed. Remind him of vows. The mask had cracked, and through the crack Daniel saw the truth. His marriage wasn't built on love, it was built on lies. But as the first light of dawn crept through his window, he realized something even darker. If Clara had written down every scheme so carefully, then how many more were still to come? Daniel sat at the edge of the bed, the spiral notebook heavy in his hands. He had pulled it from Clara's handbag again once she left for work. His eyes devoured the words, each line another dagger. Ask for $1,200, say car repairs. If he doubts, bring up his mother's comfortable retirement. His mother. Me. He closed the book, his jaw tight. Rage churned in his chest, but underneath it was grief. Grief for the man he thought he was, for the marriage he thought he had. By the time Clara returned that evening, Daniel's decision was made. He wouldn't let another day pass under this web of lies. She breezed in with shopping bags swinging from her arms, humming lightly. "Darling, I found the best deals today. You won't believe the discounts." "Stop." His voice cut through the room like broken glass. Clara blinked, her smile faltering. "What's wrong?" Daniel held up the notebook. Do you want to explain it?" Her face drained of color. For a long moment she said nothing, then forced a laugh. "That's just household notes. You're misreading it." "Household notes?" His voice rose, trembling with fury. "Then why does it say, the 14th of April, ask Daniel for $2,000, use surgery excuse? That's not a grocery list, Clara. That's a script. A script you've used to bleed me dry." Clara's eyes flicked toward the door, panic flashing before she masked it with indignation. "You went through my things? That's the real betrayal here." "The betrayal," Daniel thundered, slamming the notebook on the table. is that I've worked myself into exhaustion while you and your family live like royalty. Imported champagne, catered parties, luxury cars while I've skipped meals to make sure you had everything you asked for. Tears welled in her eyes, but her voice was sharp. You don't understand. My father— The front door opened before she could finish. Victor entered, carrying a briefcase. His smile froze when he saw the notebook on the table. Daniel turned to him, fury radiating. You, all these years begging me for money, pretending to be broke. Meanwhile, you spend thousands on wine and groceries. Explain this. He jabbed a finger at the notebook. Victor's yaff clenched. Daniel, calm down. This is between husband and wife. No, Daniel snapped. This is between a man who trusted you and a family of liars who've been laughing behind his back. Victor set down the briefcase slowly, his eyes narrowing. You think you're the first? You think you're special? Son, you were easy. Too easy. The words landed like blows. Daniel staggered back, his hands curling into fists. So it's true. All of it. Clara's facade cracked. Dad, she hissed, glaring at Victor, but it was too late. The mask was gone. Victor shrugged, his voice cold. Business is business. You had money, we needed it. Simple. Daniel's world collapsed in that moment. The vows, the promises, the tender words from Clara, every memory twisted into poison. You used me, he whispered, his voice breaking. Every kiss, every smile, every tear, all of it was a performance. Clara reached for him, desperation spilling from her. Daniel, listen to me. I cared for you. Cared? His laugh was hollow. You wrote down lies like shopping lists. You planned how to make me feel guilty, how to squeeze more from me. That's not care. That's cruelty. Victor stepped closer, his presence looming. You'll keep quiet about this. You wouldn't want your mother dragged into it, would you? Poor Margaret, scraping pennies while we dined well. Imagine how she'd feel if everyone knew how foolish she'd been. The threat sent heat surging through Daniel's veins. Don't you dare speak her name. She saw through you when I wouldn't. She's the only one who's been honest with me. Victor's eyes darkened. For a tense moment, the room held its breath. Daniel straightened, his hands steady now. It's over. You won't get another cent from me. Not one. Clara's tears spilled over, but anger laced her words. You'd throw away your marriage over money? Number. His voice hardened. I'm ending this because of lies, because everything between us was built on manipulation. Victor sneered. Then you're weaker than I thought. Daniel grabbed the notebook, holding it high. Number, I'm stronger than you ever imagined. And now I have proof. Clara gasped. Daniel, please. But he was already at the door, notebook clutched to his chest. As he stepped into the night, his heart shattered. Behind him, Clara's sobs mingled with Victor's curses. Ahead of him waited a reckoning he wasn't sure he could survive, because now the truth was undeniable. And truth has the power to destroy everything. The knock came just after midnight, sharp, urgent, rattling my door in the stillness. I shuffled from my chair, heart pounding, and opened it to find Daniel standing there, his face ghostly pale, his eyes red-rimmed. Son, I breathed. What happened? He stepped inside without a word, shoulders sagging, the small spiral notebook clutched tightly in his hand. When the door closed behind him, he broke. His knees buckled, and he sank onto my couch, burying his face in his hands. They admitted it, Mom, he whispered, his voice shredded by grief. Every word you said, every suspicion, it was true. My heart clenched. I sat beside him, wrapping my arm around his trembling shoulders. For months, I had prayed for this moment, yet seeing it crushed me. No mother wants to be proven right in matters that shatter her child's life. Tell me, I said softly. He lifted the notebook with shaking fingers. Clara wrote it all down. Every lie, every trick to make me open my wallet. Her father didn't even try to deny it. He called it business. Daniel's voice cracked on the word. Business, Mom. As if my marriage, my love, was nothing more than a transaction. Tears welled in my eyes, but I blinked them back. This wasn't the time for my grief. My son needed strength, not more sorrow. I loved her, Daniel whispered. I worked nights, weekends, gave up everything because I thought we were building a future. But it was all fake. I took his hand, squeezing it gently. What you gave wasn't fake, Daniel. Your love, your effort, your sacrifices, they were real. She was the one who didn't deserve them. His body shook with silent sobs. I feel like such a fool. Number? My voice was steady, fierce. A fool is someone who learns nothing. You've opened your eyes. That's courage, Daniel. Don't let them twist your kindness into shame. He leaned into me then, just as he had when he was a boy with scraped knees and broken toys. My arms wrapped around him, holding the man he had become, the man who still needed his mother's embrace. Minutes passed in silence, broken only by the hum of the fridge and the ragged sound of his breathing. Finally, he pulled back, wiping his eyes. "What do I do now?" he asked hoarsely. I looked at him, my heart aching with both pride and sorrow. "You already know the answer." His jaw tightened, his gaze dropping to the notebook. He opened it again, flipping through pages of cruel calculations. If he hesitates, cry. Remind him of vows. Use the mother's health if needed. The words were poison, seeping from the page into his soul. He closed it with a snap, his decision etched across his face. "I can't stay married to her," he said, his voice low but resolute. "I can't wake up every morning beside someone who sees me as a wallet, not a husband." The words hung heavy in the air, a verdict and a death sentence all at once. I nodded slowly, tears slipping free despite my resolve. "Then you must end it, Daniel. Not just for your future, but for your dignity. Love built on lies is no love at all." His hands clenched around the notebook. "It's going to hurt like hell." "Yes," I whispered, "but staying will hurt worse. Every day, every dollar, every smile that isn't real, it will break you piece by piece. Better one wound now than a lifetime of bleeding." He met my eyes, and for the first time in months, I saw clarity there. Pain, yes, but also determination. "Will you stand with me?" he asked. I gripped his hand firmly. "Always." The clock ticked past 1 a.m., each second carrying us further into the future neither of us had imagined, but both of us now faced. Daniel stayed the night, sleeping fitfully on my couch, the notebook resting on the table like a silent witness. I sat awake, watching him, my chest heavy. My son was about to walk through fire, but I knew he would emerge stronger, forged by truth. As dawn broke, pale light spilling into my small apartment, Daniel stirred. He sat up slowly, his face drawn but resolute. He picked up the notebook and slipped it into his jacket. "Today," he said simply, "I'm telling her it's over." "Oh?" His words hung in the morning air, final and irreversible. And though my heart ached for his pain, a flicker of fierce pride burned within me. Because at last, my son was choosing freedom over chains. Daniel stood at the doorway of Clara's family home, the spiral notebook clutched in his hand. Morning sunlight gleamed off the fresh paint of the facade, mocking the rot within. His heart pounded, but his voice was steady when Clara opened the door. She smiled at first, eyes widening in surprise. "Daniel, you're early. Come in. I was just—" "Number." His tone was firm, unshakable. "We're not doing this anymore." Her smile faltered. "What do you mean?" Daniel held up the notebook, flipping to a page covered in her neat handwriting. "The 12th of March. Ask Daniel for $800. Say rent is overdue. The 14th of April. Request $2,000. Use surgery excuse. May 3. Utilities shut off. Ask $650. Clara, it's all here. Every lie, every manipulation, written like a script." Her face blanched. "That's not—" "Don't." His voice cut like steel. "I've seen enough. I've lived enough. My mother warned me, and I didn't listen. But now I know. You never loved me. You loved what I could give you." Tears filled her eyes, but her words rang hollow. "Daniel, please, you don't understand." Behind her, Victor appeared, adjusting his watch with lazy arrogance. So, the boy finally grows a spine. Danielle's yaw clenched. "This ends today. I'm filing for divorce, and neither of you will ever see another cent from me or my family." Victor smirked, unbothered. "You think you're the first to walk away? There's always another generous fool out there." Clara turned on her father, eyes blazing. "Stop. You're ruining everything." But Daniel only shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping. "No, Clara, he's telling the truth, and you just confirmed it." He placed the notebook on the table between them, as if laying evidence before a judge. "Keep it. Burn it. It doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is this. My life with you is over." Clara's tears spilled freely now, her voice breaking into hysteria. "Daniel, you can't do this. We're married. You swore vows." "I swore vows to a wife," he said quietly. "Not to an actress reciting lies." Victor sneered, but Daniel turned and walked out, the slam of the door reverberating like thunder. Back at my apartment I waited, nerves twisting like a storm inside me. When Daniel arrived, his face was drawn but resolute. He dropped heavily into a chair, exhaling as though he had carried a mountain. "It's done," he said simply. Relief and sorrow tangled inside me. I reached for his hand. "I'm proud of you." He gave a weary smile. "I should have listened sooner." "No," I whispered. "You had to see it for yourself. Now you have." The weeks that followed were hard. Divorce papers filed, arguments over assets, bitter words exchanged. Clara tried every tactic, begging, blaming, threatening. But Daniel held firm, his resolve unshaken. By the end of the process, it was clear. Clara had hidden a secret bank account, shopping bags filled with jewelry and designer clothes, all bought with Daniel's money. The truth spilled into the light, undeniable and ugly. And with that truth came freedom. Daniel moved into a modest apartment near his job. For the first time in years, he slept without guilt gnawing at him, without his phone buzzing with fabricated emergencies. Slowly, color returned to his face and laughter to his voice. One Sunday afternoon, he came to my place with groceries, real groceries, bought with thought, not show. We cooked together in my small kitchen, chopping vegetables and stirring sauces. The scent filled the air, warm and comforting. As we sat down to eat, Daniel lifted his glass of iced tea. "To freedom," he said softly. I raised mine. "To truth." For the first time in months, my heart felt light. 2 years later, Daniel remarried, this time to a woman named Rachel, a kind, grounded soul who valued honesty above all. She never once asked for money, never played on guilt. When she came to dinner, she brought her own casserole dish, laughing as she set it on my table. "Margaret," she said that evening, "family isn't about what we can take. It's about what we share." Her words brought tears to my eyes, because I knew Daniel had finally found what he deserved, love without strings. And now, dear listener, I want to turn to you. Have you ever seen someone you love fall into the trap of manipulation? Have you had to make the painful choice to speak up, even when they didn't want to hear it? Share your story in the comments. I promise, your words will help someone else who's going through the same struggle. And if you followed Margaret and Daniel's journey all the way here, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. We share stories like this every week, stories of betrayal, courage, and the healing that follows. You won't want to miss what comes next. Because in the end, truth may hurt, but silence hurts more.